Hi there, I'm Cecilia Larson, and I've been in this church for many years. My parents were early members of this church, and about 1950 is when they started. The church was dedicated in 1951, and my parents were here, and there was a picture in the album that came out for 150th anniversary that shows me, my mom, and my brother walking up the steps to the church. My very earliest memories that I can come up with were when the parents were actually painting some of the rooms, and I think it was the classrooms. And I was running around watching them, and then, of course, told to come back and behave. So that was always a problem. My parents' social circle were members of this church, and therefore my closest friends were also members of this church. I remember them attending a builder's class, and I also remember them having everybody over to the house, and I would come in the room and see probably 2 or 3 card tables set up, and they were all playing canasta or pinochle. I recently found my baptismal Bible that was dated in 1954 and signed by Wayne Green. I vaguely remember the baptism itself, too. I was in the junior and youth choir, and I remember them being led by Ernie Savage, and I can remember being in a little bit of trouble once in a while, too. I was also in Cairo and CYF, and I have fond memories of trips to the coast, often to Fogarty Beach, as I recall, and also trips up to Hoodoo, which were a little bit of torture learning to use that rope tow. I remember so many members of the church being involved in our lives. The house that I still live in or have come back to was built by the Dalkey brothers. I went to buy my shoes at the Junior Bootery with Ernie Savage. I took driving instructors from a member of the church, and I took piano lessons also from a member of the church. As an adult, I was married in the church by Maurice Thompson. I then became an Air Force wife and traveled all different places, so I really never had a church home or family. My faith was challenged when in 1979 my son was killed in an airplane crash along with his best friend and my second husband. I was devastated, of course, and my question of God was, well, why? And instead of not believing in God, I just felt that for some reason I wasn't in favor with him. And I know now, in retrospect, that having a church family then would have been very helpful, but I did not. Later on, I was privileged to work as a nurse in obstetrics in the nursery, and I was able to see the miracle of birth many times, and you can never lose your faith when you see that. And I never returned to a church home or family. I lived in the Lake Tahoe area, and other than working different shifts, and often on the weekends, I was either skiing or sailing, and recreation was the life. But in all of that, I was appreciative of God's creation because it was just a beautiful place. Don't go there, though. There's too many tourists now. I made a lot of trips back to Salem to visit my family, of course, and was here frequently. And every time I was here, I would be attending church with the folks. When I came back to church each time, I would help Dad practice because he was a singer in the choir, and most folks remember him for that. In 19, I was here especially in '04 when my mother was dying of terminal cancer, and it was a privilege to be able to be here with her at that time. In '05 then, an ATV accident ended my nursing career, so I came back here to recover and realized that I needed to be with Dad, and I felt good being with Dad, and I felt like home when I would come into this church. So my years since then have been here. I worked for a while, not working, but I volunteered as a hospice volunteer because they had been so good to my mother going through that. Well, back here in the church, I started playing the bell choir, which was a lot of fun and a challenge. I decided to explore different Sunday school classes, thinking that would be a good idea. And I settled in the discovery class. And that was like having group therapy, I thought. So it was comforting in that way, too, because then my sister had cancer, and as she was dying, I got great comfort from the members of the discovery class. At one time, I also considered looking into other churches, just thinking maybe I needed the experience of that. Dad passed away, and I just felt like, well, maybe I don't have to be in church anymore. Maybe I should go look around. And I came into the sanctuary here one day and felt like I was home. Just looking at the beautiful area, the stained glass windows, the communion table, the beautiful pews. So I felt like, why look around? Why waste time? I'm here. This is it. This is my home. There's a saying that God puts people in our lives who help us do God's will. And I'm grateful to have found so many wonderful people in this church that have welcomed me back like I was never gone. And I have just appreciated that so much. This church family has many talented people, and I've learned to know musicians, artists, poets, and physicians, and especially feeling the love of this congregation. If I were to have one wish as I get older now, is for the younger generation that will come on and support this church, and that they will also walk into these rooms and say, this feels like home.